you're going to understand the UFO phenomena, you got to deal with the people who are dealing with the phenomena. There's a lot of people who've got a very high level of contact, and I think you guys are probably in that category. Everybody's into video, everybody's into YouTube, everybody's into stories, and so I think you're on the right track in terms of what you're doing. It is, as I said, in 45 years, this is one of the most bizarre stories I've ever heard, and it's got some of the best evidence ever. And people have got to pay attention that when you see a check like that, it means the world is not what you think it is, and you better rethink what's actually going on, because this proves that it's a whole different world.
But if you don't mind, maybe we could start with you introducing yourself, Grant, and a bit of your background.
Okay. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. I want to thank you for taking time from your valuable schedule to be with me today. I've got two fantastic guests today, Rob Freeman and Marcus McNabb, who are with Skylight Films. And I saw this story that we're going to do today in Toronto, I believe it was, correct? Rob, you did this in Toronto?
It was at the Alien Expo that I told you the story.
Yeah.
Yes.
And next month, officially, I'll be in this circus for 45 years. And this is one of the most amazing stories I've ever seen. I made Rob tell me, we were at the a dinner table, and Rob is a Canadian UFO researcher who films and videotapes some of the most amazing sights of anomalous craft in the sky above. An active field researcher, Rob has been interested in UFOs since age 12, which I didn't know. I want to welcome Rob and Mark. I've seen a lot of stories, and this is one of the most amazing stories I've seen in 45 years of research. This is a story that just blew me away when I heard this story. I just couldn't believe this. It's just wild. And you got the evidence too.
We have the evidence, yeah.
Yeah, and so we were going on an expedition to Australia, and I guess we were going there for about 3 weeks. This is the first time we went, and there were three of us. There was Marcus, there was Liz, and there was myself. And Liz had to pay her rent before she left, her rent for her apartment in Toronto before she left. So she wrote out a check for her rent, and we were going to be in Australia over the March 1st period. So we were leaving in February, around the end of February. And this was what, 2015 or something?
17, Rob, 2017.
Okay, and she, she's got a good relationship with her ex because they share two boys. And so she asked her ex, if I leave you the check, will you go into my apartment and get it? But anyway, she left the check in the top dresser drawer, and she asked him, would you go in and take it down to the landlord on March 1st? He said, no problem. So March 1st, we're down in Australia. He goes in and he opens up the dresser drawer, takes the check out of the checkbook. He tore it out of the checkbook physically. He goes down to the landlord, who's an older gentleman, who is not computer savvy. I don't even think he can do much more than just talk on a cell phone. He doesn't text or anything.
He's in his late 70s.
No emails, no nothing. Yeah. But anyway, he gives the landlord the check, and the landlord writes 203 on it because that's the apartment number that Liz was in. And he takes the check and he writes it in his register. Okay, and then Liz's ex leaves. So all's fine, we're in Australia, and Liz is waiting for the check to go through the account. She's watching on her app. And finally, I guess it was around the 10th of March, it went through she saw it on her app, and she saw a screenshot of the scanned check having gone through the account. It appeared right in her app. So that's great. She was happy that her rent was paid. We continue on with our expedition. We get back from the expedition, and she happens to go in her top dresser drawer to take the checkbook out to write other checks for other utilities and so on. And Grant, what do you think was still in the checkbook?
The check, yeah.
Now, Right at that moment when that happened, Marcus and I were waiting at the airport to go to Norway to another expedition to be with Erling Strand, you know, the Hesselin Lights. And Liz is just blown away. And I think, Marcus, this is where I'll let you pick up the story.
You
Yeah,
got the check on the screen there now. That's the one that's still in checkbook, right?
still to today, Grant. It's still in the checkbook, completely intact, completely intact. And so in a brief summary, we get the call in the airport, and Liz says to me, Marcus, I got to talk to you about something. This is really strange. And I said, well, what's going on? She goes, the check, the check that was to pay my rent. I said, she goes, I still have it. And I said, what are you talking about? I said, what are you telling me? Your rent didn't get paid? Like, that's the first thing, right? That pops to your head, like in a normal kind of way. And she goes, no, I'm looking at my phone. I'm looking at the printout of the, the scan of the check. It's gone through. It's gone through the whole system. I'm seeing the scan front and back. I said, well, okay. And she goes, Marcus, the check is still in my checkbook. And I said, how's that? I said, I don't get that. I said, how's that possible? And I said, did you talk to your ex? And she said, yeah, Marcus, I called him. I asked him if he took, and he said, yes, I came, got the check, took it to the landlord. And he goes, and I said, so then I told Rob right away in Norway, I said, Rob, this is really strange. I said, we're here, but this is happening on the list back in Canada. We're in Norway. And he goes, and of course, Rob, being Rob, starts to do the machine starts working, right? It's like, well, let's put it together. Like, he goes, well, have her take a picture of the checkbook, have her take a picture of the perforations, have her take a check, pictures of everything to show what it is. And I said, okay, so she did. And then while we were in Norway, in a very short sentence, she starts sending us these scans and pictures that she's taking at home. And she's sending us all the different things from the bank. So, of course, Rob and I are like, we're in Norway, but we're fascinated by this, right? It's an unbelievable event. And Rob is pointing out those really particular things. He's like, well, look on the original check, there is no, there is no number. Like, in the scan, you see her apartment number in the right-hand corner of the check because the landlord had written down her apartment number.
Yes, Grant. The check on the screen there, you see where Marcus has the red arrow on the bottom of the right-hand side of the check. You see there's nothing written beside.
Nothing there.
The landlord took that check and he wrote 203 under the signature line. So on the copy that went through the bank, you see the number 203. Yet in the check that is still in the book, the 203 is not on it. It doesn't show up because it hasn't happened yet.
And we actually, too, Rob, sorry to interrupt, we actually we had a guy who specializes in forensics, because we went through the first original tests of taking the scan, taking a check in the checkbook, doing a photocopy, putting it up on glass, just literally putting on glass and putting them on top of each other. And we're like, these are identical, but hey, let's go one step further. We're not specialists. We're not forensics people. So we talked to a guy who knows forensics, and he looked at it and literally said the same thing. He said, these are identical. And then he looked at us and went, what in the world are you showing me? Because he did not get it. He's like, you're saying that this check went through a banking system, stamped, even, hey, Rob, right on the back, stamped on the back, wet stamped by the bank on the back. And Liz and I went to the bank and said to the teller, what's your process? Oh yeah, we showed them. She said, oh no, that's a wet stamp. He would bring the check in and we'd cash it and stamp it. I said, he'd have to be here to do that, right? You'd have to wet stamp the back of that check. She goes, oh yeah, you have to physically show up and come with a physical check and we would stamp it and take it back. So we realized that all of these things, the forensics guy matching with the wet stamp, matching with the fact that the number wasn't there, but it's in the original, but it's not on the other. It's still, to today, it's still something that just boggles our mind.
Many people, Grant, have said, oh, your landlord took a picture of the check and deposited. But the debunking part of that is when you turn the check over, or at least the scanned check, and you see the back, as Marcus said, there's the wet stamps from the teller. So the landlord had to take the actual original check, the physical original, into the bank to make the deposit. And the teller herself, with her stamp, stamped the back of it from an ink pad. And that continued on. Like, and you know, when you're at the bank, they run it through the scanner right in front of you. So the teller would have scanned it right there and then in front of the depositor, in front of the landlord. And that is the copy that we have. The bank even was so good to make us a nice printout copy of the check and gave a letter saying that this is the actual legal copy of the check that was deposited. But how is it possible that the paper check, the original, is still untouched in the checkbook, and yet it went through the whole banking system?
Wow. Desta, can you flip to one of the check with the what do they call it, with this wet stamp on the back?
Yeah,
there we go. And
There
now
you go.
in the upper part, you can see that's the back of the check. It even says the word back of check.
Yeah.
And on the right-hand side, you see the stamp, you know, deposit to the credit of. The teller would have stamped that and hand wrote those numbers. And then she also wrote on the left, credit, what does it say? Deposit only to the credit of, and stamp that. And then when it was scanned, that's where it says capturing branch. That's when it was actually scanned in. And then on the left-hand side, you see the front of the check, and you can see the number 203 written on there. That's what the landlord wrote on the original check when he took it from Liz's ex in his apartment and took the rent that day. Right there, yes. And yet you look at the original check, it's still in the book. It does not have 203 written on it, because that's kind of like, there's a timeline here that is split. Or Grant, I know you've got other words to describe what happened, and maybe why don't we turn to you and ask you a couple questions here.
Okay, well, first give me your theory, because you were telling me the theory of what you, because you were going across time zones, and you were talking about this, your idea you thought might have happened in terms of, it's pretty weird theory, but.
You know, people were kind of jealous of us, professionally jealous that we had this event happen. They're kind of like, how come you guys had such a profound event happen? We've never had anything like this. Well, Brent, not only have we had that happen, but last summer we had a second event happen. Okay, and I told you about that, I believe. And we were on our way to San Francisco, and actually continuing there to, where was it, Mount Shasta?
Mount Shasta, Rob, yeah.
Now, I was coming in from Greece. I had just been on a holiday to Greece. I had just flown into Toronto, waited there 5 hours, and then flew on to San Francisco with Marcus and Liz. I met them in Toronto. We flew on. Okay. Now, when we got to San Francisco, because we had to switch to another plane going somewhere else near Mount Shasta, when we were waiting there, our incoming plane that we were going to catch leaving San Francisco was late. And this was over the lunch hour. And I said to everybody, like, I hope they're going to give us vouchers for lunch, because we're going to be late.
Yeah, nervous, yeah. Go ahead.
Right, you remember now.
Yeah, I remember your story now, yeah.
So I went up to the lady at the counter and I says, you know, we're kind of going to be late here and we're needing lunch. And she said, well, there's no problem. If the plane is 4 hours late, we'll automatically issue everybody vouchers if they ask, right? Yeah. So we're counting down the time as they kept announcing it was going to be later and later. I was out into the mall area of the airport, seeing what was in the stores and so on. And Liz and Mark were back at the gate. They came on the speaker and announced for all those on this flight, it's now 4 hours late, therefore we qualify for vouchers. And if you'd like a lunch voucher of $10 American, come up to the counter, we'll issue you one. So I didn't know this at the time, but Liz went up and got hers. Okay, I was out in the mall area and I heard that and I dropped everything and I went back. I thought there's going to be a big lineup. I'll just go straight back. So I go back to the counter, and since I bought the tickets for everybody, I asked for the group's vouchers. So she said, no problem. So she printed up 3 vouchers for Marcus, Liz, and myself. Now, Marcus and Liz were right there because Liz had just gotten her voucher, but I didn't know that. And I turned to Liz and Marcus and I said, here's your vouchers, guys. Liz says, I already have one. I just got one. I said, well, now you got 2. So she had 2 vouchers of $10 each. And I gave Marcus his voucher. So then Liz went ahead and, you know, she went and spent $20 on I forget what it was, chicken salad and a drink or something like that. It came to $20.10. I went and bought mine. Everybody was happy. Mark had his lunch. So we were now back at the boarding, and they were announcing that the plane was getting ready to go. Everybody get ready in the boarding area. And I said, does everybody have their boarding passes? So Liz reaches in her purse, and what is there right next to the boarding pass?
The vouchers.
Vouchers grant. And we took a double take, and now we have some of this on film, and we have some pictures of this. But Liz looked at them, and she says, oh, I'm going to spend these also. And I said, don't you dare. First of all, I wanted to keep a record of these. But second, I thought, if we go ahead and spend those two and they're the same number, I could get in trouble. I'm the guy that bought the tickets. This could be considered a fraud, especially if it's the same number, and we could get into trouble over this. I know it's not a lot of money, but it's technically a fraud if we respend them again. And but we looked at them, and Liz and I said, why don't you go, Marcus says, why don't you go back and see if the originals that you cashed in are still at the cashier? So Liz and Marcus went back there, but by that time the shift had changed, and they had cleared the drawer, the cash drawer, so we couldn't get a copy of it. But once again, we have the original vouchers. Now, when Liz cashed in her vouchers, she had to surrender them. And the lady took a yellow magic marker and highlighted the amount and put them in the drawer. So we now drew a comparison between this incident and the check incident. And I have my little list here. Okay, so this is a comparison between the voucher and the check. Number one, there was a middle person involved, and in both cases, male. Okay. Now, the time difference between the two was March 1st, 2017. That was the check incident. In Australia, June 1st, 2019. So both were on the first of a month. Okay, the full name was in the check and in the voucher. So Liz's full name, all her names. She's from Latin America, so she has 4 names. And they were on both the check and the voucher. We were, in both cases, Grant, traveling to an ET expedition. The first one was Australia, where we're meeting up with people, CE5 type stuff. The second one, same thing, meeting up with CE5 to Mount Shasta. The next one, now this one's interesting. In both cases, we were traveling a long distance against the rotation of the Earth. That one piques my interest a little bit because of physics and angular momentum and all these things about spinning. And, you know, I'm not a physicist, but I hear physicists talk about these kind of things. So that would be an interesting one to look into. The person cashing the check or the voucher wrote something on the paper, okay, in both cases. Now, in this next one, number 7, at least one of the 3 was traveling halfway around the world. Okay, so we were traveling halfway, all 3 of us were traveling halfway around the world to Australia. And in this second case with the voucher, I was traveling halfway around the world, all the way from Greece, all the way around the world to Australia. So at least one person, both times, was traveling halfway around the world. Here's the next one, number 8. We could not recover the original that was cashed or redeemed. Could not get it back. All we could do was get a copy. Because in Canada, once they scan it, they have to keep it legally in the bank where you made the deposit of the check. They keep it there for 5 to 7 days, and then it's destroyed. You know, that may be different in other countries, but here in Canada, and the scanned copy of the check is legal. Now this one was just with the voucher. Why is it that United Airlines issued a second voucher for Liz? You would think with modern computer systems and accounting, once a passenger has been issued a voucher, that's it. The system would say, I'm sorry, it has been issued to her. So that's an anomaly within an anomaly, okay? Both are related to an exchange of value. There's value, like there's monetary value there. Number 11, both times we're super tired. The rational mind is asleep. So maybe it's the right brain, don't know. In both cases, a change of 3 or more time zones. Okay, Number 13, we were going to an event that was planned in advance. So the event is in our mind. It's circulating around in our mind. You're looking forward to something. There's expectations of what you're going to do, why you're going there, and it's to connect with ETs. Okay, now here's an interesting one. 822 days apart, the two incidents or the two events, which is 411 twice. 411 is, the number for information, 411. Don't know if it means anything, but for those that look at numbers, it's possible there's something there. And in each time, Liz was the recipient of the item. Liz was the recipient of the item. So there was 15 things common between the check and the voucher.
Well, you want my theory?
Go ahead.
One of the things, if you interview Desta about this, Desta's kind of an expert on the Mandela effect. This idea that all these things keep changing, where you look back at a certain thing and it didn't happen and it was spelt different 20 years ago or whatever. That was the one. Yvonne Smith wrote a book called The Chosen. And that's why I asked who's the experiencer, because it seems to follow around the experiencers. And I have a theory. I've given a lecture a couple times. It's called the theory of wow. Have you ever heard that theory? Where I say, basically, they're not doing anything. They're just getting your attention. So you guys are doing films, and they go, "Oh, this will be good. We're going to give these guys something to film." So I had this whole thing about the theory of wow. Like, for example, you describe your sighting, where, same with me, where you're there, and it's almost like you're the chosen, like Yvonne Smith calls the chosen. So they say, okay, Rob is here, and he's seeing us, and turn up the lights. He can't see us. Turn up the lights. And you're sort of like, you're in this plan. You're one of the chosen ones that's going to put out the message to them. Like, why do UFOs have lights on them? We don't have lights on our planes. You don't need lights on a UFO. They have the lights so you can see them. And so I go through all these different things, whether it's cow mutilations. Why do they take all the blood out of the cow? So you'll take pictures. So you'll go, wow, what is going on here? Or when they come back the second day, they say, oh, there he is. Fly by, and then they say, oh, look at the look on his face. Let's do it the other way. It's coming the other way. And they come across, and you see all this stuff, and you get sort of wound up in this thing, and you become the messenger. And they give you these really weird things, these synchronicities, and that's because you can't let go of it. And you go to the next thing. You're their spokesman. They're like the chosen, like the Yvonne Smith. That because you're the film guys, they're doing these really weird things, so you can put it out. And all they want people to know is, this isn't us. There's something weird going on, like the metals. They dropped the metals, and people look at the metal. Oh, maybe we're going to build a flying saucer out of this metal. And they're dropping it, and it's like, well, they don't come across the galaxy, and then little pieces start falling off the flying saucer. They're dropping this stuff. They're actually getting people, and people are looking at the metal, looking at UFO photographs, and they just want everybody to know something's going on. We're not alone, and you get into it, and you start putting the pieces together, and you try to figure it out, because it gets you going, and you go like, wow, and you put it out, and everybody else goes, wow. And that's all they're doing, is they're making everybody go, wow, what's going on here? Like, we're not alone. Something's going on. There's something outside the physical world. And everybody tries to figure it together. Because if they come to you and say, we're here to bring you freedom and democracy, Jesus and McDonald's, you're going to go like, get out of here, get lost. It has to be indirect, where you decide that, oh yeah, this is for real. And you're the one carrying the message. They're not directly, they're doing it indirectly through people like you. So I would see you as the chosen people who they've elected to show really weird things to, so they can get out the message that we're not alone. If you're going to understand the UFO phenomena, you've got to deal with the people who are dealing with the phenomena. It doesn't really get you anything to look at metal pieces. It's all very interesting, but there's a lot of people who've got a very high level of contact, and I think you guys are probably in that category where stuff is happening around you, and luckily you've got, and that's the modern world. It's nobody reads books anymore. Desta and I know that because we publish books. Everybody's into video, everybody's into YouTube, everybody's into stories, and so I think you're on the right track in terms of what you're doing. And it seems like the stories are getting sort of more dramatic all the time. That where they're putting more and more weird stuff into the mix, where they know they've got your attention. Stay open to what's going to happen, and it will happen. And you guys seem to approve that. And I appreciate your speaking with us, and maybe you can do another one once your next project comes out, because I think it's very important work in today's age, where people are very visually tuned in to what's going on. They give you something more and suddenly everybody thinks you're crazy because you're obsessed. But when you're living in this magical world, I mean, what choice have you got?
It's too fantastic. I mean, you can't turn away. Once you've seen it, you realize you could never go back to the way it was.
Yeah, and as with the New York Times, I'll close with this. With New York Times is, you may not think the signal's getting through or people are picking it up, but I remember because Rob was in it in the 60s and I was in it in the 70s, and all these years we've been at it, and it's like your tires are spinning, nobody believes you, it's not getting anywhere, and I remember I wrote an article called The 64 Reasons the Government's Decided Not to Tell You the Truth, and Stephen Greer had the one, the stock market's going to melt down, people are going to jump off bridges, all the religious people are going to go crazy, whatever. And then what happens? New York Times puts the story out. Yeah, the government is investigating UFOs, and everybody goes, yeah, I knew that already. And it's like you raise the thing, and it makes it acceptable, almost like we're no different than any other social or political movement, whether it's African Americans or gay rights or whatever. It just gets to a point where everybody goes, oh yeah, okay, I get it. It's no big deal. And I think so. You guys are doing a good job in sort of, especially because I think what the advantage to you guys is if you put it on TV or you put it somewhere, the skeptics can watch it. It's not like you're going to go into their face and confront them with it. It's on TV and they go, I'm going to watch this piece of garbage and laugh at it. And they sit in there and they don't realize they're getting subliminally trained as to what's going on. And more and more people do that. It's not an offensive way to get the message across. Whereas to go and try to convert somebody, it's just not going to work. So thank you, gentlemen, for what you're doing. And we'll talk about having a trip. And I really appreciate you telling me these stories. And we'll make sure you get a copy of the book. And it's one of the prime stories in the book. It is, as I said, in 45 years, this is one of the most bizarre stories I've ever heard, and it's got some of the best evidence ever. And people have got to pay attention that when you see a check like that, it means the world is not what you think it is, and you better rethink what's actually going on, because this proves that it's a whole different world.